Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Village of Bartlett Committee of the Whole meeting for November 15, 2022. I call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to again please call the roll.
Trustee Daney?
Here.
Gansey? Here. Gunstein?
Here.
Hopkins?
Here.
Laporte?
Here.
Zawanski? Here. President Wallace?
Here. First item we have this evening is Building and Zoning, Chairman Hopkins.
Thank you, President Wallace. We have one item, and that's 309 Oakbrook Court. With that, I'd ask Ms. Stone if she could go over this.
So we received a variation request for a 12-foot variation from the 35-foot required rear yard setback. 309 Oakbrook Court. There's an existing receipt on the back of the residence, which was built without a permit. The homeowner is wanting to tear that down and construct a larger three-season room at the rear of the property. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed the request, conducted the required public hearing at the November 3rd meeting, and recommended approval of the request. They felt that because the site was backed up to Oak Grove Park, that it presented itself to be an unusual circumstance for the property.
What's the normal variance that we usually allow? Isn't it just 5 or 10 feet?
So it's a 20%.
Yeah.
Is usually what the standard is.
Yeah.
Is the maximum where it triggers a different vote among the board.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, in this location, I don't see any issues with that.
I don't either.
Anyone else?
When I read it, I didn't have any issues with it, considering the location.
So we'll send this on to the village board for a final vote then.
Thank you, Chairman Hopkins.
Thank you.
License and Ordinance, Chairman Gunstein.
Thank you, President Wallace. Tonight we have a topic for discussion. The village has a state statutory limitations regarding the regulations of political signs on residential property. Currently, the village code treats political signs as temporary signs. However, political signs are unique and don't fit the parameters of typical temporary signs. The limitations in the statute do not have clear definitions, and we ask for legal review to give us some guidance on how to best regulate political signs within the statute. The ability of the village to regulate political signs fall within two areas: the number of signs allowed and the size of the signs allowed on residential lots. The recommendations for special exemptions for political signs and its parameters for signs permitted on residential lots are before the board for discussion tonight. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paula Schumacher.
So you have a couple of opinions before you from Ansel Glink, and we asked Ansel Glink to take a look at this, largely because everything on the agenda that you did tonight, Brian was working on, and it's mostly time-sensitive things that we have our village attorney working on, and the question of our political sign regulations took a little bit more of research and a little lengthy process, and it wasn't as time sensitive. So I'm going to let Kurt walk through the memo that he's provided and answer any questions that you might have about the changes that we need to make to our zoning ordinance relative to political signs. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everyone. So the legislature has really tied our hands on what we can and can't do with political signs. They've made that decision for us. They've preempted home rule authority. So this is not just Bartlett, it's every community within the state has these same limitations. A lot of sign codes have not really been updated to encompass this new change that the legislature made. We've been working with a lot of our clients as well to kind of update them to make them consistent with this limitation. It is pretty strict. It does really limit what we can and can't do. Size limitations are pretty much all that we can enforce on signs on residential property. So I want to make that clear. This is only applying to residential property. It would not apply to political signs on non-residential property. Those signs would still be subject to our general temporary sign restrictions. So we've drafted up a text amendment. It would essentially carve out political signs, differently than other temporary signs in the village. It would include the same, current size limitation for all temporary signs, 6 square feet. That's obviously up to the board and the PZC if they want to change that size. We just went with what the current size limitation currently is in the village sign ordinance. Then we included a 6-foot height limitation. We can, again, impose reasonable size limitations. You want to make sure somebody's not putting up essentially a billboard in their front yard. So having a height limitation is also something that we recommend as well. And then just making clear that all political signs have to remain on private property. Sometimes we do see political signs bleed into the right-of-way. Having that clarification in your sign code will make it very easy for the village to ensure that these political signs don't start showing up in your right-of-way all over the place. So it's unfortunately an area where our hands are tied a little bit. So we really are limited to a size limitation here. And a lot of the surrounding communities, we've looked at their codes as well. They also have size limitations. Some of them still have an outdated time limitation where they said that certain campaign signs had to be removed within XYZ date of the election, things of that nature. The legislature's taken away our ability to regulate that as well. So a time limitation is something that we can't impose either. So unfortunately, again, this is a difficult one where the legislature's decided to really preempt what we can and can't do. So we've kind of reworked the code to carve this out as, I guess, minimally as possible so that all of our other temporary sign restrictions are still applying. We're just creating this separate exemption essentially for political signs on residential property.
So in essence, you're asking us just to fall in place with the current regulations that's been drafted by the legislature.
So essentially, the discretionary portion of what the village has is how big of a sign we want to allow. We can't limit the number of signs. The legislature basically said, you know, there's obviously a lot of races on the ballot every year. They don't want to limit you to pick and choose what races you want to support.
We can't limit the number, right?
Right. Correct.
We can't limit the amount of time that they're there.
Right. Correct.
So the size and the height.
Just the size and the height. So all of the, no, never mind.
And when you say height,
Sorry, go ahead.
when you say height, you mean the height of the sign itself or the height of how it sits on a property?
And that's something we can clarify. Generally, we just say total height, so including any support structure as well. If the village wanted to allow higher signs, that's certainly something we
Because some people put them on their fences.
I think that would be,
Some people put them on their fence.
Some people put them on their fences, you know, the privacy fences. And I don't see a problem with that, but I don't know if that's what you're talking about. I mean, I don't know that anybody else does, but I don't know if that's what you're talking about when you're talking about height.
certainly I think that would still apply, but if the board would like to carve out an exception for higher signs to allow them higher, again, that's where we have the discretion, is how big, how high we want to allow them. That's where we have the leeway here.
Well, let me ask you this, hitchhiking off the height, the 4x4 signs that we see throughout the area, those would not be in compliance with this ordinance, would they?
Not as drafted. Again, if we want to allow larger signs, we can. We just use the current restriction for temporary signs in the sign code, which is 6 square feet. So,
I know I haven't seen many 4x4 in residential areas, but I have seen them. Some people have put up 4x4s.
That's 16 square feet.
16 square feet, right?
Yep.
yeah,
Hey, very good.
I know. Learned it.
we can limit those. We can limit that size. That is something we can do if we want to go smaller.
Does anybody?
Doing this?
Huh?
Is there a problem here?
I don't see a problem currently, honestly. I look at the signs that are out there and I think this is your right to put a sign for who you want to see elected. And if it's a 4x4, then it's a 4x4. If we want to maintain that as the maximum allowable size, a 4x4, I'm fine with that because I really have never seen anything larger than that.
Norba.
You could have 20 4x4 signs. I know.
Who cares?
Yeah, but we've gone through so many elections, and honestly,
How many have we really seen?
I haven't seen that many.
It's created a real
Count them
problem.
on one hand, 4x4. The problem I have with this, and I know we can't do anything about it, is the length of time that they can leave these signs up. I know that during this last election, some of us were out the next day picking up our signs, or their signs. And now we drive through the village, and they still have political signs up, and specifically, not residential, but you go down Route 59, and I don't know how they even put those signs there, but that's the problem I have, is the length of time that these political signs can stay up.
There's nothing we can do about it.
It's tough. We pulled the legislative history, the debates on the bill back from 2011, and it was very clear that was their intent, was to
But
say.
those ones on 59 are supposed to be pulled anyway.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be there anyway.
Right.
And it's actually the state's responsibility to pull those if the people don't take them out.
Staff isn't running around picking these up, are we? We're not wasting.
We're not wasting any time doing that.
When you talk about the size of the signs, the total square footage, is it the total square footage of each sign, or is it total square footage of the combined amount of signs on a property? Question.
And that's a great question, because this is one that comes up a lot with political signs. A lot of communities, I think, have tried to kind of inadvertently enforce a restriction on the number of signs by imposing a very strict aggregate maximum of, say, 18 square feet, where you can only really have 2 or 3 signs. We think that would be hard to justify, given the legislature's clear intent to allow you to have as many signs on your property as you want. So we would recommend not including any aggregate size limitation and really focusing on that individual size limitation, just because you could essentially limit somebody's right to have as many signs as they want in their yard through that aggregate size limitation, unless they're going to have, very tiny signs.
Well, for me, I don't see any issue with the way it sits right now. At what point do we go from signs to holiday decorations, and then we trickle on to everything else that we want to put in our yard? Okay, we have codes. The codes state certain parameters of things that we can put in our yard, trailers on driveways, those things, and those are good codes. They keep the area clean. But I think this kind of pushes the limit. In my opinion, this is pushing the limit on
We wouldn't want to
freedom
have
speech.
Mike Worden ticketed, cited by,
We're going to carve out his house, though. His house has to be carved out on this exemption.
He's going to start.
And Mike Mustin.
special use, right?
So,
I don't
Yeah, I don't
think
think there's
bigger
anything.
than 4x4.
I think 4x4 should be the maximum allowable.
Size.
4x4?
4
I
signs.
agree, because what if you're like pulling out and you can't see past?
Yeah, and then that's another
a
big
6-foot
thing
sign.
too, is not being able to see if you're around a corner or something.
Yeah.
No parkways.
No parkways,
We have,
obviously.
Yeah,
We've included that in
on
there,
your
that they
no
can't.
parkways.
Yes.
Do we have a distance from the sidewalk or side yard that it has to be placed?
They would have to comply with otherwise applicable setbacks. I can't say I know off the top of my head what those might be.
We have anything taller than 3 feet is not allowed within the vision clearance triangle, which is 25 feet from the corner of the property.
Okay.
Let's let it go.
Yeah, it seems like.
Let's not try it.
Vision triangle, that's a new term.
Yeah, that's,
We're learning new terms. Vision, where's my vision triangle?
Let's not try and fine tune this.
So,
what we've got.
does anybody else have any questions for staff? I think we just send this back and let it,
Are we good with it?
we're just gonna let it go.
Mr. Hopkins, we haven't heard from you.
I'm good with it.
Okay. That's because you live in a dead-end street by a barn.
Nobody goes down that street.
We can paint the side of your barn.
That's the case, then.
Side of his park.
That's all I have to report tonight on that.
All right, thank you, Chairman Gunstein. And with that, before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving. This is kind of a weird cycle for the board. Usually we're a lot closer to Thanksgiving on this
We
meeting,
are.
but thanks.
it's next
Have a
week.
great Thanksgiving, everyone. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Daney, seconded by Trustee Gunstein. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Daney?
Yes.
Gansey?
Yes.
Gunstein?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Port?
Yes.
Swansky?
Yes.
We are adjourned.